following program is a production of the Fairfax Network, Fairfax County Public Schools, funded in part by the Virginia Satellite Educational Network.
Welcome to the MTA studio, home of Meet the Author. My name is Della Kidd. My guest today is R.L. Stine. He has written hundreds of books for children, but he is best known as the man behind the horror in a series called Goosebumps. His books are scary, a little naughty, and just plain funny. R.L. Stine is here today to answer many of your questions, talk about the writing process, and highlight his latest series, Rotten School. What a title. Welcome, Mr. Stine.
Well, thank you, Della. Such a nice introduction. You're giving me goosebumps.
Well, terrific to have you here. Tell us what prompted the new series, because it's funny versus scary.
You know, my job has been to terrify kids for the past 15 years, and it's a great job. I'm happy to have terrified millions of kids.
And you've succeeded.
Thank you. And I thought maybe I'd give them a break and do something funny for a change, and that's why I'm doing Rotten School.
Well, it's a terrific, funny series, and we've received several hundred questions from kids all across the country, so I think we need to go ahead and get started. Absolutely.
Excellent.
This is from Lynn Haven Elementary, and it reads, Dear Mr. R.L. Stine, what does R.L. stand for? Sincerely, Micah.
Micah, R.L. is just my name, Robert Lawrence. That's all, but no, you know, my whole life no one ever really called me R.L. Everybody calls me Bob.
And were you ever, when you were growing up in Ohio, did anyone call you by any other nicknames, or was it just mostly Bob?
That was it. I guess when I was little, I was Bobby.
So R.L. is just an author title.
That's it.
Okay.
Well, you know, I wrote funny books and joke books for kids for many years, and my name was Jovial Bob Stine. And when I wrote my first scary book, I thought, that's not a good name for scary books. So I decided to
went back to the funny. Well, we've got 3 book covers, and we're going to talk about what they all have in common. And I think that might help us a little bit with the way some of the things that you recall growing up. Okay, let's look at the first cover.
Yes.
This is 101 Monster Jokes by Jovial Bob Stine. The next is G.I. Joe Star Raider by Eric Affaby.
Oh, now you're embarrassing me, bringing out the G.I. Joe books. You're really embarrassing me.
And finally, The Protectors, The Jet Fighter Trap by Zachary Blue. Very cool.
I wrote all of those books, under all those different names.
Why did you choose such interesting names? How did you choose such interesting names as author titles?
This was just for fun, really. And at one point, I was writing so many books that I didn't want R.L. Stine on every book, so I thought, oh, I'll put on some other names. Zachary Blue, actually at the time that came out, Judy Blume was an enormous best-selling author. I mean, Judy still does very well. But she was huge, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice if my books went next to Judy's in the bookstore? So I picked a B name that would go right next to Judy Blume's books.
Well, that has a lot of common sense to it.
I thought so. It didn't work at all.
It didn't work at all.
No, The Protectors was a huge flop.
Well, the Goosebumps weren't, and we have a lot of questions about the new series, but Goosebumps, a lot of questions as well.
That's
From
nice.
Snellville Middle School in Georgia, there are some questions that I suspect that you hear a lot. Dear Mr. Stine, were you scared easily as a child? And which is your favorite Goosebumps book? Sincerely, Taylor.
Well, 2 good questions. I was very scared as a child. I was a very fearful child. I was afraid of the dark. I was afraid that something was lurking under my bed, and when I stood up, it would grab me by the ankles. I was actually afraid to put my bike in the garage at night. I thought someone would be lurking in the garage. So I had a lot of fear as a child, which may be one reason why I stayed in my room typing all day. I don't know. And luckily, I have a good memory. And now I can bring back that feeling of fear. I can remember that feeling of panic, and I put it into my books.
Was there a favorite?
I think my favorite Goosebumps books were all the ones with Slappy the Evil Dummy, Night of the Living Dummy, and Bride of the Living Dummy, and all the Living Dummy books. Slappy was horribly rude. He was a really rude character, so he was really fun to write.
This email arrived from Deltona, and it reads, Dear Mr. Stine, when did you start writing books? Sincerely, Sheldrima.
Sheldrima, you know, I started writing when I was 9 years old. I found an old typewriter up in the attic, and I dragged it down to my room, and I started typing little magazines, little funny magazines, and typing short stories. And I'd just stay in there for hours. I was a weird kid, I think, very weird kid. My mother would be outside my door and say, go out and play. What's the matter with you? Go outside and play. I'd say, it's boring out there. Type, 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 type.
You brought a couple of wonderful products from your earlier career, and it looks like one of them might have been created on that typewriter you're talking about.
Yes, this was actually not for my career, I have to say. This is one of the early funny magazines that I did called Whammy. And you can see there's a witch on the cover mixing up Betty Crocker, using a Betty Crocker recipe. And this is what I did. This is how I spent my childhood. Here is an ad for Hate Parade cigarettes. And I did a parody of the Lone Ranger called The Loon Ranger.
Could you explain what a parody is?
Basically, a parody is you take something like a TV show or a book or a movie, and you make fun of it. You do your own version of it, and which makes fun of it.
So the Lone Ranger became the Loon Ranger.
The Loon Ranger. And I drew all this stuff, and I would bring these into school, and my teachers hated them. I would pass them around to my friends, and they would disrupt the class. My friends would be laughing instead of listening, and the teachers begged me, Bob, please stop writing. Please, that's the kind of encouragement.
It's the opposite of what we normally do.
Yes,
we
I
have to
did not
encourage,
get
right?
encouragement. I got total discouragement. Bob, please stop. Please stop.
Well, you certainly didn't. You did not
listen to
stop,
them.
that's for sure. Tell us about bananas.
Anyway, you can see when I was 9 or 10 years old, this is what I was doing. I wanted my own humor magazine. That's all I dreamed about. And then I moved to New York. I was this kid in Ohio. I went to college. I moved to New York. And eventually, I actually achieved it. I had my own humor magazine for 10 years, and it was called Bananas. And it was like Mad Magazine, only it had a lot of color in it. And you can see here's an ad for light water,
New low calorie.
half the calories of regular water. And it had many parodies and satires, just as we were talking about. And it never fails, things that always happen at the dinner table, and comic strips. And oh man, I had the most wonderful time doing this for 10 years.
Well, it looks like you had a lot of fun.
This was before I got scary.
Well, here's a question from Seth in Overland, Missouri. Dear Mr. Stine, why do you have to write about goo monsters and living dummies? Why can't you write about a simple phantom? Is that a complaint?
A simple phantom? What is a simple
phantom?
I don't know. I thank you for the idea. Now I have to think, I'm going to do a book now, Attack of the Simple Phantom. I like that.
Be a great one.
I like that. I don't know. I try to find things that kids are going to find scary and funny at the same time. So, one of my books was called It Came From Beneath the Sink.
Ooh.
And it was about a sponge, a very evil sponge. And the sponge was a bad luck thing. It brought everyone bad luck. But who would write about a sponge? This is what I try to do. It's a very scary book, but it's funny at the same time because it's about a sponge.
Something you'd not think about writing a story about, that's for sure. I understand we have a call, so go ahead, please. What is your question today?
Hi, I'm Sean from Arlington, Virginia. Do you ever get nightmares when you're writing your books?
Sean, I will tell you, I never get nightmares. I guess I write them all out during the day. I have the most boring dreams you can imagine. Horrible, boring dreams. One night I dreamed I was eating a Snickers bar. And that was
pretty boring.
That was it. That was the whole dream. I was eating a Snickers bar. And that was a pretty good dream for me. I've never woken up with an idea. I've never dreamed of a story idea. It's a shame.
We have another question that's probably asked in every class. Representing so many young writers who, this would have a common theme. Mrs. Neal's class from Northwestern Middle School wants to know, where do you get your ideas? You don't get them in your dreams.
Yeah, people ask me that. That's my most asked question. I'll tell you a funny story real quick. I'm in San Antonio Airport. I'm being searched by the security guard because I get searched a lot. I don't know why. I'm standing there. I have my shoes off. My belt is open. He's wanding me. Guy's wanding me. He's wanding me. He says, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Okay, go ahead." He said, "Where do you get your ideas?"
Well,
security guard in the airport.
And that's a universal question because that's one of the biggies for kids too.
I always want to say, well, I figured out why kids ask me that question so much, and it's because kids have to write more than any living humans. They have to write every week. You graduate from school, most people never have to write again. They're so happy. They never have to turn in anything. But kids have to write book reports, they have to write essays, they're always writing. So I think they asked me this question because they want to think there might be a trick or something for getting ideas. And the problem is, there's no real trick. Where do ideas come from? Nobody really knows. Now, like Rotten School, the ideas for my books, I don't really know where they come from, but I'll tell you that my trick is to think of the title first. And I can't work unless I have the title. Now, this Rotten School book, The Great Smelling Bee, I thought of that title. I thought, gee, what would that be? I had the title, and then that led me to what the story would be. So I think most authors get an idea.
And then provide a title.
And then later on, they're working on the idea. Later on, they get a title. I work backwards. I always have a title first. And it's a good trick.
And it
I
helps
think
guide
it would
your
help
thinking.
kids.
Yeah.
I think that would help kids too.
Well, a lot of readers prefer less scary books. Dominique has a comment and a question. From Gotham Middle School, she writes, "Dear Mr. Stine, I get freaked out easily, so I think your books are sort of freaky. What made you want to write horror books?"
Well, as we said, I wrote funny stuff for years and years, and it was fine. I had a lot of fun with it. And then one day, I wrote my very first horror book, which was a book for teenagers called Blind Date, about a boy who starts getting phone calls from a girl who says, "Hi, I'm your blind date. I'm your blind date." And he doesn't know who she is, and he tries to track her down, and he finds out that she's dead. And that was my first scary book, Blind Date, and it was published and came out, and it was a #1 bestseller. First time in my life. And I thought, wait a minute, I found something kids really like. And I wrote a second one and a third one, and kids loved it. And I thought, I've struck a chord here.
Yep.
Kids like to be scared, and I've been scary ever since.
Finding an audience. A last question before we go to break is about a writing trick, or what language arts teachers like to call literary device. This is from Julia of DeLand, Florida, and she wants to know, "Dear Mr. Stine, why do you have a cliffhanger at the end of each story?"
That's my big trick.
And before you answer that, we need to go to a break, and then so hold that thought and we'll be right back.
Very good.
You're watching Meet the Author, a production of the Fairfax Network, Fairfax County Public Schools. It's time to take a short break, and when we return, more student questions for R.L. Stine. But coming up, school children make an educated guess to the meaning of cliffhangers. But first, how to stay on the right track. So don't go away, we'll be right back.
What makes a good writer? A good writer takes the ordinary and makes it into the extraordinary. A good writer is always creative. A good writer always edits the work. A good writer takes opinions and makes them into new ideas. A good author makes reading fun. I'm not sure, but I think it is a strategy that authors might use. I don't know for sure, but I think it is some kind of graph to help the author. I think a cliffhanger is some kind of job when you're trying to go up or down a cliff hanging from a rope.
A cliffhanger is a literary device that authors use to encourage readers to read on to the next chapter. Cliffhangers come from movies, where they used to have a character in the movie hanging from a cliff, hanging on, and you had to wait and see what would happen in the next movie, if the character would fall off the cliff or not.
Welcome back to Meet the Author. R.L. Stine is today's guest. Bob, let's follow up on cliffhangers. What are they and how do you use them? Why do you use them?
Here is a typical Goosebumps cliffhanger, okay? A girl is in a haunted house. She goes upstairs. She opens a door. She steps inside. She opens her mouth in a scream of horror. End of the chapter.
Makes you want to turn that page.
And then you have to go on. What is she
That's right.
screaming about? What does she see in there? You've raised their interest. They have no choice. They have to go on to the next chapter to find out what happened.
That's right.
And that's basically what a cliffhanger is. And what I try to do, maybe largely for fun, and I think it's one of the things kids really liked about Goosebumps, is that there's a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter. Every chapter has some kind of horrible shock, something to keep you reading.
Did you have a favorite?
No, what I just told you
Yeah.
is that's your basic cliffhanger. You leave them screaming at the end of the chapter, and they say, "Why? What's going on here?"
I have to find out what's next. We have a call. Go ahead, please. What is your question today?
Hi, Mr. Stine. My name is Megan. Here's my question. How did you think up the title Rotten School?
How did I think up the title Rotten School? I wanted to write a book, or a series, a whole bunch of books, about a really bad boarding school, where the school was bad and the kids were bad and everyone was bad. And the name actually I was walking my dog in the park, thinking about it. And Rotten School, it just popped in my mind. And there it was. I said, that's perfect. Of course it's a rotten school. And then we decided that the school would be founded 100 years ago by a man named I.B. Rotten.
And there's some wonderful character names. Headmaster Upchuck.
Yes.
April, May, June.
Yes, April, May, June is Bernie Bridges' girlfriend, only she doesn't know it yet. Only Bernie knows it.
Yeah.
Actually, in real life, she can't stand him.
We have another call. Let's find out.
very good.
Tell us what your name is, please, and what is your question today?
Hi, Mr. Stine. My name is Keegan. How do you work with your illustrators?
You know what? I don't work with the illustrators. The funny thing is that when you publish books with art, they don't want the author to talk about the art. They want the artist to have total freedom to do what he wants. So I have only actually met the artist. We have a wonderful guy, Trip Park, who does all the art for Rotten School, and it's very funny. I've only met him once, and every once in a while he'll send me a sketch to say, what do you think of this? Does this look like the character or something? But for the most part, I do my thing and he does his thing.
It's interesting, the interpretation of your characters from somebody else's point of view.
Yes, it's really fun to
Yeah,
see what
yeah.
somebody else will do with your characters. And usually it's not the way I pictured it at all.
How
It's
about
totally
that?
different.
We have a question. We've been talking about titles, obviously, and Randy of Lynn Haven in elementary school, he wants to know, is it hard to come up with those titles? So what we've got is I'm going to share several titles. We're going to take a look at them, and then we'll chat about them afterwards.
Very
the
good.
first one is called The Blob That Ate Everyone.
One of my favorites.
The next, The Cuckoo Clock of Doom.
Oh, you want me to comment?
And
I didn't know you were stopping.
No, that's okay. And it came from Ohio.
Yes. It came from Ohio as my life story, and since I came from Ohio and I wanted it to sound like a horror movie, we called it Came from Ohio. Cuckoo Clock of Doom, I have no idea where that came from. It makes no sense. And I had the title, and so I had to write a book about a cuckoo clock, and I thought, what would be scary? What could possibly be scary about a cuckoo clock? And I came up with this idea of someone turning the cuckoo around backwards, and then the one who did it starts getting younger and younger and younger as the clock moves, and they can't stop it. And the kid is younger and younger, and now he's 9 and 8 and 7, and he's going to be a baby, and he's got to stop the clock somehow before he disappears. So it's scary, but I love that title. I'm very happy with that title.
And titles are so valuable in catching the interest of a reader.
Yes.
You also brought some photographs with you today that I certainly want to make sure that we have time for. So let's look at the screen, and if you could walk us through what these photographs are.
All right, this is pretty scary, this one. My very first book was called How to Be Funny, and it was a book for kids on how to be funny in school and how to get big laughs at the dinner table. Parents hated this book. And on the back, there was my picture, and it said, he's working on his next book, How to Be Bunny.
How to be bunny.
Yes,
All right.
right.
Let's take a look at the next
It's
photo.
very embarrassing. Thank you for embarrassing me.
You're very welcome. What's the next photo? Let's take a look at this one.
Now, this was on the set of the very first Goosebumps video and TV show that we did, The Haunted Mask. And it's a wonderful young actress named Catherine Long who played Carly Beth. She's wearing that mask. The mask was really tight. It was actually almost glued to her face. It was so tight. And we're on the set of the show.
Didn't look comfortable at all.
No, and we actually had a stand-in for her, another girl, because she couldn't really stay in it very long.
No.
It was really uncomfortable.
The next photo is an interesting one as well. Can you tell us about this?
This is the cast of Eureka's Castle, which was a TV show that I wrote for Nickelodeon. And I wrote that for 4 years. It's the only TV show I ever wrote. And I did all the puppet episodes. It was really fun. We had a great time.
It looks like a lot of fun. Brendan wants to know, we have he's on the line for us. What is your question, Brendan?
Hi, I'm Brendan. Mr. Stine, how do you come up with the names of your characters?
I will tell you a secret, Brendan, about the names of my characters. For a long time, my son would sell parts in Goosebumps and other books. And he would come home and he would say, Dad, you got to put Jamie in the next one. Or Dad, Will has to be in the next one. I think he was getting like $10 from the kids. And then I would, of course I did it, and I would put his friends' names. And then I needed a lot of names because every book I wrote started all over again with a new cast of characters. So I needed 5 or 6 new names every month. So I took my son Matt's, I took his school directory, and I just went through his school directory and I used all the kids in his school.
Wow. Do they know that?
I don't know. I haven't been sued yet, so I don't know.
Well, as I was looking through the emails, I noticed that students are curious about your personal life, your daily routines. Sierra at Fort Myers High School wrote in, have you had any life experiences that sparked the ideas for your books? And if so, could you give us an example?
Sierra, luckily, the answer is no. They all come from my imagination. You can't have too many big adventures when you're in a room typing all day, which is basically what I do. So no, I have to say, well, I have one. There was a Goosebumps called A Night in Terror Tower. And I had been in London, and I went to the Tower of London and walked through the torture chamber. And it's really, people were tortured. I mean, it was horrible to see. And it gave me the idea for this Goosebumps book. So that's one time that I actually was inspired by something I saw. Usually, though, my ideas come from old movies that I've seen or other books that I've read or that kind of thing. Or just from sitting down and saying, I have to write another werewolf book. What am I going to do? What am I going to call it? Werewolf Skin. Well, what does that mean? That thinking like that.
Well, you've got readers that are grown-up kids as well as young kids, and this is from a college student at Virginia Tech.
Yes.
Dear Mr. Stine, I read a lot of your books in elementary school. Did any parents write to you and say your stories were too inappropriate for such young children? Sincerely, Stephanie.
Very few. Parents have been wonderful to me, and teachers and librarians. For the most part, they're so supportive. And when I do book signings or I do a lot of school visits, they come up and they say, thank you for getting my kids to read. They don't think, they know that my books aren't that scary. And they just say, thank you. My son never read a book in his life. And I caught him under the covers at 2 in the morning with a flashlight, reading one of your books. that kind of thing.
I
which
experienced the same thing
which
as a
is
classroom
wonderful.
teacher. Students that were
Yes.
reluctant readers brought your books in, and I saw it firsthand in my own classroom.
Oh, that's
Jonathan,
nice.
yeah, Jonathan from Deltona Lakes Elementary asks, how many books do you write every year? What is your favorite book? And do you ever write about dogs? So he really has 3 questions in one.
Whoa, I love dogs. I have a dog. I'm home with the dog all day long. She sleeps under my desk, Nadine. And so I spend more time with Nadine than anybody I know. So I love dogs. I have written about dogs. We did a Goosebumps called The Barking Ghost. And in Rotten School, Bernie Bridges, the star of Rotten School, has a big fat bulldog that lives with him in his dorm at school. The dog is called Gassy. And you can guess, maybe you can guess how he got that name.
He does have an unfortunate name.
It's a shame, yes.
The first part of Jonathan's questions were how many books you write every year.
Well, it depends on how I'm working on. I'm going to write 7 or 8 Rotten Schools this year. I might write a few new Fear Streets. I used to write a book a month. Now I write a book every other month. I write a lot of books.
You
I
do
write
write a
6
lot
to
of
12 books a year. I'm just so lucky. I mean, it comes so easily to me. And kids who want to write know they want to write because it's easy for them. And they discover this at a very early age, that it's easy and enjoyable to write, like me at age 9.
Just as you did.
And
with
it's
women.
a very lucky thing. I can write 20 pages a day, and I never have writer's block.
Students in Ms. Reese class asked, what part of your career do you enjoy the most?
Well, there are 2 parts. Right now, I'm on a book tour for Rotten School, and I'm going to 15 cities and visiting schools and bookstores, and I get to see my readers. I love that part. That's a wonderful part. But I also love sitting in my room and writing this stuff. I've written 300 books. I still look forward to doing the next one.
An email from Derek. He wants to know, Dear Mr. Stine, is there anything else you would like to be besides a writer?
I don't know. That's all I've ever done. I think I would like to be a seal in the Central Park Zoo. I think they have a really good life, you know. They get to swim all
Yes, they
day,
do.
and people throw them fish, and I think that would be very enjoyable.
Very
That's
calm
the
life.
only other thing I've ever thought of doing.
Well, I have one last question for you. Briefly, could you give us some good advice for writers of any age?
Well, of course, my advice for writers is kind of boring, but I think it's good advice. One is write something every day. Keep a journal. Just write about what you did during the day. Just keep that writing gene, keep it active. Keep a blog. Write a blog about what's going on. The other advice is to read. Read a lot. And don't read just one author or one type of book. Read all kinds of books.
There's no such thing as reading too much, that's
Yes,
for sure.
that's right.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us today.
Oh, I had
It's
so
been a
much
pleasure
fun.
talking to you. If you would like to learn more about R.L. Stine, visit his website at www.rlstine.com. If you would like to learn more about this program, visit us at www.fcps.edu/Fairfax Network. For the Fairfax Network, I'm Della Kidd. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep dreaming.